Hey guys, so today we are gonna talk about front end and the limitations of making improvements to a project. So let's get into it. Now, twice in my career, so far at least, I have been faced with talking to a manager who has gotten it into his head that we need to make an improvement to the application's performance. In other words, he wanted me at the time to have a look at improving the speed index or the load time or something of that nature in order to improve the product that we are working on. It seems to be a very reasonable thing, don't you think? All things considered, I am very excited about doing this sort of thing, and as I told them, I'll gladly do it, and I know how to do it, but I can't. And both times in my career when I've looked my manager in the eye and said this, they have kind of gone, "What? What do you mean? I thought you knew this stuff." And both times I've explained the same thing. Yes, and it's because I know this stuff that I tell you that I can't do it. Let me explain to you why. So, the issue with front-end development, which is the thing that I think is so hilarious because I see this come back to me. It just keeps on coming back over and over and over. That's at the same time why I think it's so funny that some people seem to it's so interesting because they treat the project or the front-end code base like this gutter project where they can just basically do whatever they want and hack things together and so forth until they reach a point where they actually need to start caring about it. And usually by that time it's too late. It's much, much, much too late. So what they do is that they realize that they have a problem. And thank God for this, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have had this job today. I actually spoke to my colleague the other day. We were talking about my hiring process, and I kind of looked my colleague in the eye and I said, you know, mate, I'm not stupid. I know why I was hired. I know that I'm here I told them that my interest is to work in Scala and get really good at that, but I'm not a fool. I know exactly what they want, because it's what everybody else wants. They want somebody who has the type of experience to move a really shitty front-end code base into something that is manageable. That is usually how it goes, because what usually happens when you start out is that you go for speed, you go for all the things that are right at the time, and usually what happens is that you hire people who neglect the front-end code base to the point, as I said, until it's basically not possible to do the shiny fancy techniques that performance optimization people these days are pushing. And the fact of the matter is that this problem is actually, as I said, so common that they hire people to just take care of it. The issue comes when that person then comes in and explains that I can't really fix this in a reasonable amount of time. And I actually went one further and I told my boss, not my first manager, because my first manager had a little bit of a different scenario. So my first manager or rather, let's talk about this manager first and foremost. I told this manager, because this is a fairly small company, I told him, you can't afford to do this. And he just looked at me, what do you mean? Well, I can't, of course we can afford it, just do it. And I said, yeah, absolutely, I can do it, but it's going to take me a complete overhaul of the entire way that we are doing things today. I'm going to have to remove all of the tech debt. I'm going to have to refactor everything so that the tree shaking works. I'm going to have to start looking into splitting the assets to the point where I can, as much as I can, because I have already split out the obvious stuff, the low-hanging fruit, which is what I did the first week I was here, and the next iteration of doing that is going to have to be to actually reduce the amount of stuff that we're sending to the client. And apart from that, you have this we have plenty of weird things that they've done what most people do, that they assume that we're building a React application. And because they don't have anybody on the project, or rather they started out just hacking things together, now they have a React application that is fairly tricky to maintain over time. And they're so far, where basically the project is so far down the rabbit hole that it's very little you can do to stop it at this point. All you can really do is to try to, a little by little, make things nicer. And it was the same thing at the first company. Because of the way that the application was structured, we couldn't really leverage into these optimization techniques that my managers are hearing about and they want to kind of leverage. So that's basically the situation when it comes to being the sort of front-end developer, where it's a bittersweet thing. Because it becomes this, it's a testament to how important the skill set that you acquire is, but at the same time it's a little bit bitter that most of the time you have to kind of work in an environment where people really don't care about it until it's too late. Usually. I suspect that this is very similar to how people in the security community feel. Nobody cares about security until it's already too late. Usually. And I suppose that's the thing I'm trying to say here. I'm trying to tell you that in order for you to be able to leverage a lot of these more progressive type of technologies and have the true benefits of really good front-end engineering expertise, you actually have to have a project that is structured in a way that this is actually possible. You have to actually think about these things and be willing to invest in them, because it's much trickier to add performance or to increase performance of a front-end project than it is to simply add new features to something. Adding features is easy, but it's very tricky to find that balance between feature and performance. The best trick I've ever had, or rather I've ever used in order to kind of find the sweet spot between all of these things, are two things basically. I can give them to you for free. What am I saying? Of course you're going to get it for free. These are the two tips I can give you to kind of find that balance in things. Number one, have test coverage on your front-end code. And set a threshold which asserts that you need to have a certain amount of coverage all the time. And if you go under that coverage, you fail the build, so that people can't actually add more code without actually fixing their testing and so forth. That's a very nice way to make sure that the quality of the code is held at a very good level. The second thing you want to do is that you want to have a way of asserting that the amount of stuff that you're adding to the project is kept in relation to how much performance you want. You can actually use a tool that I use myself, which is called Lighthouse. It's a very nice tool from Google. You can use it as part of the browser. It's part of your Chrome browser, but you can also use it as a CLI or part of your build pipeline. You can actually set your own thresholds there as well, so that your project needs to actually abide by certain performance restrictions, so that you can kind of get away. And that what happens is, I have found at least, is that it very naturally becomes a situation where people really think about adding more dependencies and stuff of that nature if they can't actually get the build to work. The downside and the reality is that most people don't care. And they won't care. What's more likely to happen is what happened to me, which is basically that my colleagues told me that they were annoyed by that they couldn't move forward and like add things and so forth. And I said, that's the reality of the web. That's exactly because a server-side engineer does not. they don't understand that in their world there is no cost to just add more code. In front-end, there's always a cost for every damn thing you add to the project. You have to grasp this. If you don't get that, then you shouldn't be making front-end products, because the limitations are there in a different way from what they are on the server. On the server, you can just add and add and add and add, and you have to deal with the legacy, and you have to make things nice and consistent and try to structure things, but you don't have a problem with load times. You don't have a problem with perceived performance. You're not showing anything to the user. You're not sending anything over the wire. So the limitations are very different. So these 2 tips will help quite a bit and will work for almost any project. But honestly, the true battle to be had is basically that I think that the only way to actually get a project to a point where you can actually leverage these sort of techniques and these sort of, how do I put it, optimization techniques. The only way to actually do this is to have somebody on the project who is fairly experienced, who cares about this stuff and has a voice. Because I've seen it so many times with different colleagues that I've had where people, they don't care about it. It's so funny because the manager wants you to take care of it, but in order for you to take care of it, you have to have people to actually care about it, because you can't do it alone, but nobody else gives a shit. So it's an uphill battle. Front-end performance is an uphill battle, and it has to, in order for you to even be able to do it, the company itself, the entire organization has to want it, because you can't do it alone. You can't fix everything and then turn your back, and 5 minutes later some genius has hacked together some mess with 100 dependencies, and then because it's an ongoing battle, all of a sudden everything just dropped and all your load times went back to shit again, because somebody doesn't understand how this works. So that's what I basically told my boss. I told him that I don't think that this is a company where focusing on this sort of stuff is going to be the right fit, because frankly you can't afford it. You don't have the type of time and interest and so forth to actually create a culture around performance. You don't have that, and that's actually very sad for me as somebody who actually cares about it. It's one of the main reasons actually that I would really like to work for one of the really big companies such as, say, Google, for example, where at least that's what they're selling. I don't know if this is true, but from my experience, in order for you to be able to, as a front-end engineer, to actually get to work for real with this sort of stuff and really leverage the bleeding edge, cutting edge performance optimizations and all of this good stuff, you have to work for a company that not only has the money but also has the culture to want to do that sort of thing. And very few companies have that. It's very rare. Even a Ticketmaster, that was not even, I mean, it was hilarious how unperformant the application is. It's still, even to this day, not something that is all that valued even in such a large organization. So it's a bittersweet thing, because people want performance and they're willing to hire people to help them with that. But when they do actually learn when you actually explain it to them what actually is going to be required to get it, most people kind of have second thoughts about it. That's at least from my experience. Have a great day.